Hi there. Welcome to Just the Dis. My name's Brian. We talk about Blu-rays here, and I've got a collection update with some new discs to talk about. Smaller group, but let's see if I can grab them all at once. How about that? So you can get a sense of what I am talking about. AKIRA, you sneaky little. So we'll be talking about these this round, and we'll start with AKIRA. This is the 4K collector's edition AKIRA from Funimation, and I know this has been released from other companies outside the U.S. And it comes with a lovely booklet. Oops, upside down. Very cool stuff. It is a little, I will say it's a little hard to get it in and out of the case, so you almost have to take the booklet out and put the booklet back in after you put the movie in. That's a minor quibble. But, so there's your 4K of AKIRA. And for those that don't know, apparently there was some kind of issue with the HDR, and it was not included with this 4K. But Funimation has announced that they are going to issue replacement discs in February of 2021, and I will try to include the article I found that has the instructions for applying for that. But that said, I watched this tonight on 4K, and it still looks pretty darn good to me. That said, as well, I haven't seen the movie in years, so I don't remember the Blu-ray. I don't think I had the Blu-ray, so I have that to go off of, I guess. But regardless, it looked really, really good, and so I can't wait for that replacement disc where it's going to look even better. But yeah, I mean, a classic of animation, period, and it's neat that it's finally getting this 4K treatment, and I feel like once that replacement disc is issued, this will be the definitive version of the film. Maybe, who knows, maybe the last version we'll see released. I've known about this film for a long time. I remember the Criterion Laserdisc at the old video store I used to work at. We would occasionally get that in, and it was always a pretty neat looking Laserdisc. And I always thought, because at the time I hadn't seen it, and I was like, oh, it's Criterion, wow. And I mean, I'd heard of it, but just the fact that Criterion was backing it was like another reason that I was like, oh, this must be a real classic. And rewatching tonight, yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of a kind in terms of the design, in terms of the story. It's so unique, but a really good looking 4K. You know, like I said, I would still go ahead and order it and just get the replacement in February as opposed to waiting. But that's just me. I'm impatient like that. So anyway, that is AKIRA. Then we have another 4K here. Top Gun. This is from Paramount. And it's in a nice steelbook. And this looks gorgeous. These Paramount 4Ks, I've reviewed a couple on the channel here, and they are really a sight to behold, I'll tell you. And I've really sort of fallen, not that I was ever a gigantic fan of this movie, but it has slowly fallen out of favor with me, even as a big Tony Scott fan, which I am. I don't know, just as something I saw as Hollywood product of the late 1980s. But I will admit that in watching it again on 4K, I was hooked into it, despite knowing every beat, even though I haven't seen it in years. It looks so good that I have to admit that I was pulled back in. And Tony Scott is a filmmaker, like I said, that I like, and he can put a movie together. So anyway, I was surprised by how much I dug the rewatch of Top Gun, and it has some special features, something called the Legacy of Top Gun, On Your 6, 30 Years of Top Gun, Danger Zone, The Making of Top Gun, which is a 6-part documentary. I did get to watch a little bit of that, which was cool. Just seeing little bits about like Tom Cruise talking about the pilots and how much fun he was kind of having, because he would tell them like, let's get these shots and then we can just have fun. And, you know, he was sort of encouraging them to do some pretty fun flying. So there was a couple behind the scenes shots of him coming off the plane, and he just looked like, wow, that was intense, but also what a blast I just had, you know. The commentary is good too. I was listening to the commentary with Tony Scott, RIP, and he had some good stories about getting fired. I want to say multiple times, but maybe not. But he definitely got fired off the movie before production finished, and then was rehired, which happens, you know, from time to time. But he really did make a good Hollywood popcorn movie. So it seems silly to me that he would get fired. And the shots look, again, he's a visual guy, and it saddens me to know that he would never get to see a lot of his films in this new format and people enjoying them in this new format, because his sort of aesthetic really lends itself well to 4K. Let's put it like that. So very happy with this Top Gun 4K. What else have we got here? Okay, a little bit of random. This one from Kino Lorber, Bustin Loose, with Richard Pryor and Cicely Tyson. This is a little bit of a tribute to an online friend of mine who just recently passed away, Mike McPadden. He wrote a couple books, one called Heavy Metal Movies, one called Teen Movie Hell, and he had a couple podcasts, one called Crackpot Cinema and one called 70 Movies We Watched in the 70s. And he passed away within the last month. And one of the last episodes I heard of Crackpot Cinema, he covered Bustin Loose and DC Cab. And I thought I had seen Bustin Loose, but I had not. So I watched it in part as a tribute to Mike, and I really enjoyed it. You know, it was definitely, this cover is a little bit deceiving because it looks like, I don't know, that's kind of inflammatory stuff. Like it looks like the Klan is involved in the movie, and that's actually what that is like a 5-minute scene that plays kind of as a joke. And it's, granted, it's a weird and uncomfortable joke to say the least now, but they're made to look buffoonish and end up helping, you know, Richard Pryor get his bus moving. And anyway, so I've been holding off on seeing this, and then hearing Mike and his co-host at the time, Pat Healy, talk about it on Crackpot Cinema podcast. I was like, that sounds like a really neat movie. I need to see that. So I watched it, and it is really a much more heartwarming movie than I ever remembered, in that it's like about a criminal who doesn't really, he's not very good at being a criminal. Like at the beginning, Richard Pryor's trying to steal some televisions, and he basically gets caught, and the court allows him to have a suspended sentence with his parole officer. He's got a probationary period of a long time, and he is put into the position of taking a bunch of kids, mostly psychologically not well kids, across the country on this broken down bus. And Cicely Tyson is there. And at first it has like a very like Bad News Bears vibe kind of thing with the kids. They seem like troublemakers, but then as the movie goes on, Richard Pryor has some great moments with the kids that are much more, I don't know, they just much more emotional. Like one of the girls in the group like has been sleeping with older men since she was like 9. Basically, she was forced into prostitution, and she comes on to Richard Pryor, and he's just like, no, don't ever do that. Why would you do that? And he talks her down without making her feel terrible about, you know, sort of the mindset that she's in now. And there's another kid who's a pyromaniac and end up burning down his parents' house, and they have an emotional moment. Anyway, it has that, like I said, it has a Bad News Bears thing, but then it has these emotional, cathartic moments that some might find schmaltzy in some ways, but I think after a year like we've had, or at least I've had, It was just a really healing film to watch. So anyway, I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad it's on Blu-ray from Kino. It has an audio commentary by film historian and critic Sergio Mims, which I got to listen to some of, and I was very much digging. Yeah, a really, really neat little movie that I feel like has flown under the radar of many. I may have crossed it with Stir Crazy or something because the title's similar. I don't know, but anyway, next I've got like a bunch of stuff from Mill Creek. So we'll start with Like Father, Like Son. One of my favorite, I don't know what favorite, one of the things I enjoyed in the 1980s was the trend of switch movies, where you had fathers switching with sons. That happened a few times. A grandfather switching with his grandson in 18 again. Freaky Friday. I mean, there's all kinds of them, and they still happen from time to time. This was one I remembered real fondly at the time, and I think part of it had to do with the fact that at the time, I liked Kirk Cameron because of his sitcom, but I've obviously since changed my tune on him. It's hard to watch him now even. But the other thing that's cool is that Sean Astin is his best buddy, Trigger, in this, and he keeps the movie afloat. Like, he is a lot of fun, and I've always liked him as the sidekick role. I mean, I like him in a lot of roles, but he's good as the comic relief kind of sidekick kind of guy. Basically, you have, and this is often the case with these, you have the uptight dad and the freewheeling kid. In this case, Kirk Cameron's dad, played by Dudley Moore, is a surgeon, and he's very sort of type A, very stuffy, let's say, and his son he wants him to be a doctor as well, and his son's not really into that, but he can't tell his dad that. And then there's this whole thing, the way the switch happens is always intriguing. In this case, it has to do with this brain transference serum that Trigger's, I guess, uncle brings back from Mexico, and we have this scene at the beginning of the movie where his uncle, who looks like an older man, has gotten like a snake bite, and they have to do something to his leg, and there's a moment where this other guy takes the serum, or they give it to him, and he switches bodies with this guy, and then he switches back after the surgery, so he doesn't have to go through the pain or whatever. And then Trigger makes a very silly joke in bringing the brain transference serum over to Kirk Cameron's house. He puts it in a Tabasco sauce bottle. His dad pours it into a drink, and a Bloody Mary, and then they switch. And then, of course, it's that wackiness of like, oh, I have to go to school for my son. It'll be so easy. And in fact, he ends up alienating a whole bunch of people. And then his son goes to work for him as a doctor and ends up showing off a lot more humanitarian type things than his dad had been doing. Anyway, they learn a lot about each other, blah, blah, blah. I didn't enjoy this rewatch quite as much, but it was still entertaining. But I can't help but think of another Mill Creek title, and this one came out a while back, and that, of course, is Vice Versa. Same kind of thing. Uptight dad, and that in this case, I think he's does something in finance or something. No, he works at a department store. And his son switch. In this case, it's because of it's sort of like an idol, I guess. Like it's some kind of a medieval idol that gets switched in their luggage, and, they get switched. And I like this a little better. I guess I just like Judge Reinhold as the kid. I mean, Dudley Moore's pretty good as the kid. Dudley Moore is a great comedic actor. In fact, I couldn't necessarily say Judge Reinhold is a better comedic actor than Dudley Moore, but I guess I just like this movie a little bit better. So I started watching this again after I watched Like Father, Like Son. You can always do a switch double whenever. Let's see, I've got a few more here. New ones from Anchor Bay. The Freshman. This is Andrew Bergman's movie from 1990, and it's sort of a cult item now. I think a lot of people know about it because of the video release. But basically, Matthew Broderick plays a film student who is going to NYU, and he is robbed on the first day he's in New York by Bruno Kirby, and so he doesn't have money to buy books, but then he finds Bruno Kirby, and Bruno Kirby says, like, look, I'm sorry, but I can get you a job. And what he ends up doing is taking him to this guy who he says is the guy that the Don in The Godfather is based on. And that, of course, is played by Marlon Brando, kind of playing the Don a little bit in this. And I guess I found a really great interview with Andrew Bergman. You can just look up Andrew Bergman, Marlon Brando on YouTube. I'll try and leave a link to this too if I think of it. But he talks all about the process of getting Brando. Like he had to fly to Tahiti to Brando's private island. And then, there was all this vetting of him and the script. And Brando was just very particular. But he said he was good to work with, but he was just very particular, I guess, about certain things. And it's a great interview. There's just this whole process that one has to go through when they work with Brando. And it was just a lot of great stories. So I recommend watching that. There's no special features on this, but that Q&A functioned as like a quasi commentary for me, and I very much enjoyed it. There's also like a 3-minute interview with Matthew Broderick on YouTube talking about his experience with Brando. So anyway, Broderick gets hired by this Don to just do work for him, just random work. One of the big errands that he has to run is he has to go and pick up this Komodo dragon from like some kind of distribution center, some kind of shipping center, and bring him back. And I won't go into where that goes, but it's a very funny scene. His roommate is played by Frank Whaley, who I'm a big fan of, and they're both film students at NYU, and so they're very funny together, especially when they're trying to move the Komodo dragon around. But anyway, it's just a goofy screwball comedy kind of movie, but it's just so odd and interesting and memorable. And it's nice to see it get a Blu-ray release finally. A very intriguing movie that I hadn't seen for a really long time. So this was really nice to revisit. Yeah, good stuff from Mill Creek. And then last but not least, for this round anyway, Blind Fury. Now, this was part of a triple pack. There was, I think, Silent Rage, White Line Fever, and this. And I think both Silent Rage and White Line Fever have gotten standalone Blu-rays, which you always want, obviously, to have. If you can, have a single movie on a single disc. And I'm a big fan of this one. This is just a really fun, if you want kind of a take on Zatoichi, the blind swordsman. You have a guy played by Rutger Hauer who is in Vietnam. He gets captured and he ends up being taught, he's blinded in an explosion. And he gets captured and he ends up being taught how to use a sword, and he becomes like this incredible swordsman. And then he comes home and has this deal where one of his buddies is kidnapped. His buddy is played by, Terry O'Quinn. Because he's like a scientist, and this evil mobster guy in Vegas wants him to do something for him, and he tries to kidnap Terry O'Quinn's son to get him to do his bidding, but Rutger Hauer comes in and saves the day, blah, blah, blah. They have to take a road trip to Vegas. Anyway, it's a lot of fun just watching him, be this blind swordsman. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but the action is really good, and Rutger's really good. And, I'm sad that Rutger has passed away. He's another sort of great actor, great character performer, great action guy. I mean, this is just a super fun sword movie, and I remembered it from when I was younger, but I hadn't seen it in years. So it was a very fond revisit for me. Just a lot of fun sword action. Him just slicing people up, people underestimating him all the time because he is blind, and they're just like, we'll just take care of this guy. So super fun to watch. I really like that. Blind Fury from Mill Creek. Then we have one from MVD Rewind. This is Gun Crazy from 1992. And it is a movie I also remember from VHS. I had not seen this since VHS, if I'm being honest. And it's definitely one that I just remember from my video store days as something that really, it was part of a time when Drew Barrymore was kind of doing some racier stuff. And it's a thing where she was in sort of a bad girl phase. You know, I mean, you had stuff like Poison Ivy, for instance. And she was just doing a lot of movies where they were a little bit more risque. And this one I remembered vaguely, but it was something where I hadn't seen it in a really long time. And excuse the noise there. I think it's hailing right now while I'm trying to record this. So I'll just try and press on. But Gun Crazy, the first film from Tamara Davis, director of Billy Madison, and of she's also part of Half Baked, and this is her first movie, and it's a really neat sort of look at her as a filmmaker in the beginning. One thing that's really neat about these MVD Rewind Collection discs is that they tend to have a decent amount of special features. And this one has not only a commentary, I think ported over, a commentary from Tamara Davis and Drew Barrymore, but it also has like an 88-minute making of where they talk to James LeGros and Tamara Davis and her producer and a couple other people, and they run through her filmography and they run through her early beginnings as a music video director, and it's super cool, I gotta say. So I was kind of digging that. And then they use some of the same interviews for another thing called Portrait of a Director, Tamara Davis, and that's a 40-minute interview. So you got like almost 2 hours worth of stuff before the commentary on this. The movie itself, I like it. I don't love it. It is ostensibly looks to be Bonnie and Clyde's story, and it kind of is that. But the trick is that doesn't happen until about, I want to say, the last half an hour, not even half an hour, last 15-20 minutes of the movie. A lot of it is more setting up her character. She's sort of a sad girl who lives in a trailer with her mother's boyfriend while her mother is off in Fresno. I don't know, maybe possibly pimping herself out for heroin. It's not clear if that's actually true. We never see her mother. And her I guess her mother's boyfriend is very, very sexual with her, and that's very sad. And she's also a girl who has sort of taken up the lifestyle of having sex with boys in this dump as a way to connect, I guess. And it's just a very sad setup of her character. And then she starts getting a pen pal played by James LeGros, who's in prison, and she sort of helps to get him out of prison. And you think it's going to be this horrible thing of like, oh no, she helped get this very evil guy out of jail. That's going to be bad news. And then it's actually a very sweet movie. Like, he's very sweet to her. They make not a lot. They make several bad choices. People are killed. They are sort of forced to go on the road. But ultimately it's not that bad, you know, in terms of they seem to be decent people if misguided, you know. But again, the Bonnie and Clyde part of the story is much less of it than I remembered. So anyway, it was an interesting rewatch for sure. Definitely a movie I hadn't seen since VHS. And also was right around the time of Poison Ivy. So definitely a movie that was my, you know, beginnings of my time at the video store. So Drew Barrymore movies like this were something that you just noticed. You couldn't help but notice. Okay, and then last but not least, I picked this up cheap. This is the director's definitive edition of Heat on Blu-ray. And we've all seen Heat. It's a great movie. I hadn't seen it in a little while, to be honest. And it was a thing where I didn't remember how mesmerizing it was. Like, I remembered it being a good movie. And I actually remember the double tape, you know, VHS of it. And I was always a fan of that. And so I love the movie, but I found it to be what I call a kryptonite movie, which is the kind of movie you put on and you can't turn off. You know, I know Spielberg had said that about The Shining, or there's a bunch of movies. I don't have a lot of those. There's not a lot of movies that I can't turn off. And that's not to say that there aren't a lot of movies that I love. Even my favorite movies I can turn off if I'm tired. I just know my own threshold, and I'm like, I gotta stop. But I put this one on late last night, and it's like, you know, almost, it's like 10 minutes shy of 3 hours, and I was just riveted again, you know, after that, how many times seeing it. Just still, you know, has some of the greatest action sequences of that decade. And yeah, the opening robbery and the daylight bank robbery in the streets shootout is just, it's just incredible. It's just breathtaking to watch. On top of which, this time I finally was noticing more Straight Time energy. The movie Straight Time with Dustin Hoffman. I talked about that during the movies I want on Blu-ray last video that I did. You know, it's a movie that's very much about a convict who's trying to live a normal life, but has some bad tendencies, and you can kind of see how he's pushed back into the life again. It's like the system is not set up to support convicts once they're out in the world in a certain way, and you see a little bit of that in this, and just a general sort of how criminals live kind of movie, you know, like Robert De Niro's character has a philosophy about don't attach yourself to anything that you can't walk away from in 30 seconds if you feel the heat coming. And that's a lifestyle that I would imagine a lot of criminals have to deal with. You know, you're doing something that can ostensibly get you thrown in jail at any time, and you have to be ready to walk away in order to save yourself. So anyway, not surprising that Heat is still awesome. I just wanted to remind people there is this version of it. I think it was like $5. It was super cheap. And it has a commentary with Michael Mann, and it has an International Film Festival Q&A with Michael Mann, Academy Q&A with Christopher Nolan. That's super cool. The Making of Heat 3-part documentary, deleted scenes, Pacino and De Niro, The Conversation. You know, it's a really nice special edition, especially for as cheap as it is. So, foregoing a Criterion release, which this certainly deserves, that's a pretty great version of it. But anyway, that is it for this video. Apologies again for the hail noise during the middle of it. Hopefully you guys can make it through that. But I do apologize for that. Anyway, thank you for watching. Give this a like and thumbs up if you like it outside of the noise. I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.